What I'm going to do is, I was able to get a video of the last update of the mill out here. And I'm going to show you that. It's a little bit about the plywood plant and a little bit about the stud mill after we rebuilt it. And one of the guys that helped me with that video is sitting right here, Al Wagner. We had first access to this video. Of course, like Rudy and the boards, I made sure that I hijacked a copy of this. So, and I'm glad I did now, because we can all look back and kind of see what we used to do. This is about 20 years ago now. So we can see what we were doing about 20 years ago. Everything but hurts in these 4x6.
Sure.
Okay, now I got to find my turn-on thing here. Join me now as we tour Bonner.
If owning your own home is a time-honored American dream, it's a dream largely supported by two types of wood products, the 2x4 stud and the 4x8 sheet of plywood. Studs are used to form the frame of a house. Plywood is used in the exterior walls, flooring, and roofing. Of course, both studs and plywood have many other uses, and through the years they proved their versatility again and again. Champion International is part of this vital building products industry through its plywood plant and stud mill operation at Bonner, Montana. Every year, the plywood plant produces over 330 million square feet on a 3/8-inch basis. This includes all of the veneer that is peeled from logs and turned into finished sheets of varying thicknesses: 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, and 1 1/8. The stud mill was converted in 1989 from a sawmill that made wider lumber such as 1x12s. Today, the stud mill produces over 100 million board feet of studs and specialty products, ranging from 6 to 10 foot lengths and 3 to 6 inch widths. Both the stud mill and plywood plant are modern, fast-moving operations, a far cry from the original mill where the first log was sawn in 1886. Located near Missoula, in the heart of the Bitterroot Valley in the Northern Rockies, the Bonner area was the original home of Indian tribes, such as the Flathead and Blackfoot. The discovery of gold in nearby Deer Lodge Valley in the 1850s brought an influx of people who came to mine, to farm, and to work at different trades. The modern Bonner complex is named after Edward Bonner, who set up a trading post for the mining camps. In the 1880s, Bonner furnished timber to help build the Transcontinental Railroad, and the local lumber industry was born. Near the turn of the century, the mill became part of the Anaconda Copper Mining Company, which later bought the Western Lumber Company in nearby Milltown. The Bonner Mill remained part of Anaconda until it was purchased by Champion in 1972. Today, over 600 employees work at the Bonner complex. An additional 22 people manage the surrounding timberlands. And Milltown is headquarters for the company's Western Wood Products Manufacturing and Timberlands. As part of Champion International, the Bonner operation is owned and operated by one of the world's largest forest products and paper companies. We're a major manufacturer of plywood, lumber, and studs, with 14 manufacturing locations across the United States. We're also one of the world's leading producers of paper, over 4.5 million tons a year. Our lightweight coated papers are used in some of the nation's top magazines and in numerous consumer catalogs for major retailers. Champion's printing and writing paper mills make paper for copy machines and computer printers. We make uncoated paper for 1/4 of all the envelopes made in the U.S. and paperboard for 1/3 of all the milk and juice cartons. We also rank as the second largest producer of newsprint in this country, and our 6.4 million acres of domestic timberlands make us one of the biggest private landowners in the U.S. About 880,000 of those acres are in Montana, half of them in the area surrounding Bonner. Roughly 50% of the timber used at Bonner comes from Champion land. The rest is bought on the open market. The plywood plant uses mostly Douglas fir, mixed with western larch and a small amount of ponderosa pine. The stud mill uses what are called whitewoods, Engelmann spruce and lodgepole pine, as well as grand fir and alpine fir. Douglas fir and western larch are also processed. Some of the steps involved in making plywood and studs are similar. However, the differences in the end products themselves make each process unique. Plywood begins with the arrival of harvested timber, 100 truckloads every day. Bark is removed from the logs and eventually burned as hog fuel in one of the mill's 2 boilers. A circular saw cuts the debarked logs into 102-inch lengths. The trimmed ends, called lily pads, are chipped and sold to a nearby craft paper mill. Throughout the process, none of the raw material goes to waste. Next, the trimmed logs spend 6 to 8 hours in hot water vats. 180-degree water mixed with caustic soda conditions the wood, making it easier to peel. From the vats, the logs are conveyed to the lathes, where they're peeled into thin ribbons of wood called veneers. These range from 1/8 inch to 1/6 to 3/16. One of the 3 lathes is equipped with an XY charger, which reads the contours of each block with a laser beam. This tells the lathe how to position the block both vertically and horizontally to get the maximum amount of veneer. The XY charger and a powered backup roll enable the lathe to peel the block down to a 3.5-inch core, compared to the 5-inch core left by a conventional lathe. In both cases, cores are not wasted. They are either chipped or cut into boards. A rotary clipper cuts the veneer into the traditional 4x8 foot size. Random-sized veneers are used in the inner layers, or plies. All veneer is run through dryers to attain a uniform moisture content. This will allow the veneers to adhere to the glue when it's applied later in the process. Most veneers contain some imperfections, usually in the form of knots, holes, or discolorations. Each one is carefully inspected and assigned a grade using a traditional grading system. This identifies the relative quality of each piece of veneer. Some pieces which contain a few imperfections may be upgraded by removing the knot holes and plugging them with pre-formed pieces of clear veneer. These may be visible in the finished sheet as footholds or other shapes. Next, the veneers proceed to the layup line, where they'll be glued together. Though the technology of plywood making has improved considerably since its introduction in 1905, the theory behind its strength remains the same. Plywood's strength comes from placing each veneer so that its grain lies at right angles to the piece above or below it. This cross-lamination provides greater dimensional stability, eliminating shrinkage, expansion, warping, and splintering. Plywood makers like to think of it as improving on nature. During layup, 160 individual lines of glue are automatically applied to each veneer. Then the veneers are pressed together with a roller that spreads the glue out. This automated process accounts for half of the mill's plywood production. The other half is accomplished by spreader crews who put the veneers together manually. Obviously, this crew has worked together for quite a while. The glue panels are put 40 at a time into a charger, where pressure and steam makes the glue react with the wood to form a permanent bond. Then the panels sit in a vertical pie wrap for several hours, where heat helps the glue to cure. From here, it's on to the panel saw, which gives the ends and sides a clean cut. Then they're bundled, banded, and stenciled, and finally moved to the warehouse until shipment. In some cases, panels with cracks may be routed and filled with wood dough before they're finished. Likewise, specialty panels such as tongue and groove require some additional steps prior to shipment. Normally, the warehouse maintains a 3 million square foot working inventory on a 3/8 inch basis. Finished plywood bundles are loaded onto railroad cars and trucks for shipment to distributors around the country. In the spring of 1988, the diminishing size of trees in the area made it necessary for Bonner to shut down its sawmill. The operation was converted to a state-of-the-art stud mill operation that came back online in the fall of 1989. Total cost of the project, $15 million. Like the plywood operation, the stud mill is designed to recover the maximum amount of usable wood from the harvested timber. Logs arrive at the mill by truck and a front-end loader places them on the deck. The logs are separated by a drum unscrambler, then the first cut is made. Depending on their size, the logs are cut into specific lengths before proceeding to the debarker. Subsequent cuts are made depending on the length of log left over from the first cut to 8-foot, 9-foot, or 10-foot blocks. Once all of the length cuts have been made, the blocks are conveyed to a scanner, similar to the one used in the plywood plant. The scanner uses laser beams to position each block to obtain the maximum amount of usable wood. Again, depending on the diameter of the block, the scanner will determine how many cuts should be made, their size, and the order they should be made in. Finished studs and specialty products may end up measuring anywhere from 5 to 10 feet in length and from 3 to 6 inches in width. So depending on a log's diameter, it may ultimately yield 1x4s, 2x3s, 2x4s, 2x6s, or a combination of these. As in the plywood operation, wood that cannot be used from a log is chipped and sold on the open market. Normally, it takes several minutes before all of the studs contained within a particular log are actually recovered from the log. Once that has been done, each stud is measured for length, width, and thickness and deposited in one of 23 sorting bins. From the individual bins, the studs are dropped onto a conveyor and moved to an unscrambler where they're individually separated. Now they're ready to be stacked in bundles and transported to the drying kilns. Notice the space between each stud. This allows for the hot air to circulate and dry the wood thoroughly. Depending on moisture content, the lumber is dried at 120 to 200 degrees, anywhere from 24 hours to 80 hours. The kiln-dried lumber emerges with a moisture content below 18%. Once the lumber has been dried, it advances to the planer, where its edges will be finished with fine cuts before it is ready to ship. It is this step that causes finished 2x4s to actually measure 1.5 by 3.5 inches. Finally, the lumber is bundled, banded, and stenciled, and ready for storage or shipment. The rebuilt stud mill represents a major investment by Champion in the future of the Bonner complex. By making such an investment, we've made Bonner more competitive and responsive to our customers.
Okay, that's the end of that one. I believe I speak for Al too. We wanted to save this video because it is a window into what used to be over here. And we ate a lot of wood, but damn it, I think we done a pretty good job of it, every one of us involved. So that's all I have.
Do any of you have any questions for Glenn about that movie while we're rearranging the furniture a little bit here?
How come they didn't talk about U.S. plywood? When did U.S. plywood?
To my knowledge, U.S. plywood came in first. They've been after this plant since, rumor has it, since 1947. They'd been after Anaconda to sell. Anaconda didn't want to and finally gave in, I guess due to the economic crises in Chile. So it became U.S. plywood. Then through how big businesses soak each other up, they, Champion International got it and changed its name to Champion International. Does that sound fairly close, Al, the way you remembered it?
One.
Okay. Any other questions? I suppose a lot of you guys out here lived it, so you should remember it.
Last summer, we were in Phoenix, and we talked to a lady there, but her husband was the general manager down in Shelley, other holdings down there until they took over and moved them up. They just went back, I guess, the last year or so down there.
Wow.
They
Boy,
said
that's
they were
history
treated-
there.
Yeah, people treated them pretty nice, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. I see in the film there that the double end dogger was running.
Yeah.
When it was out of water, it wasn't running. It was broke down more than it was running. Remember that? They were all the time fixing that darn thing.
It was, state of the art. I think there was another one located up in Kelowna, British Columbia. Most of them were single end augers, meaning there was two separate machines. If one broke down, the second one took over. In the case of a machine where it's all together, when it breaks down, you're down. The way to get around that was, well, we saved an old head rake. We'll fire up the old head rake. I wish Cal was here to kind of talk me through this. But anyway, the old head rake just couldn't cut it. So we had a lot of downtime. But once they got some of the bugs worked out of that thing though, on a good day, it wasn't broke down, it could go through the wood.
You know, when I ran it, we could run, I think we were running 34 logs a minute through that thing.
Okay, in fact, there's a
And
darn good resource there.
It slowed down, they slowed it down after a while, but at its top, it was, I'm thinking it was 34 logs a minute.
Yes, sir.
Was there any part of the plywood manufacturer that required protection for respiratory problems? Because you had both steam and glue, adhesives,
Dust?
particulate material?
Yeah.
I worked there 14 and a half years, and mixed glue for about 12 years, and there was no, when you talk safety, their idea of safety, if you don't like the job bit off, we put somebody up there that's not gonna grind. This is experience speaking.
I'll vouch for what he said, because I want to understand the answer to this. Were there good reasons for having protection? Either
Yes.
through a venting system or masks?
There would have been real good reasons. I don't think Champion became aware of this until the latter days, but the cost of fixing people up who were hurt through respiratory or other physical injuries was tremendous. And when they analyzed what it was costing them, they took a serious look at it and tried to make some adjustments, but it was too little, too late. By that time, you know, it wasn't doing what they thought it was supposed to do, and they were looking for a way out.
Were the job-related deaths in terms of like what we see in Libby?
No, I don't see any of that. Any of you guys recall that? No, the only deaths I know of, when I first started there, we had a young fellow from the Stowe Mill leave the job a little early. It was a weekend and he wanted to get a jump on the weekend. He stood between two tall loads of stalls, and the spacer blocks collapsed on one, and the tier leaned over into him and crushed him. That was one death that, you know, I had witnessed there, and it was, I don't want to see something like that again. But as far as physical injuries like we're seeing in Libby, I don't recall it. I do recall, and where's Donna? She might remember this. When we were kids out there, the cinders from the old tiki burners and the boilers rained down out here like black snow. So when the women would do their wash and hang it out, it couldn't be on a work day when the mill was up and running. They had to wait till the weekend. Otherwise, white linens looked like zebra hides. Yeah, it was a mess out here. But I don't recall of any respiratory injuries.
Do you know who the name of that fellow that was there? Was it Carl Bergman?
No, that injury took place in the old sawdust pit.
Yeah, that's what I
Fell in on him. Yeah, I don't remember this young kid. I did attend his funeral, and this always stayed with me, and whenever I would do a safety meeting at the mill, I would bring this up. the grief that that young fellow's mother experienced and showed during those services left an impression on me. I don't want to go through something like that again. I hope nobody else in industry has to go through something like that. That's not a pretty thing to happen, you know. But again, like most companies, you know, I think there was this is my personal thought, I think there was a conflict between keeping the crews safe, but yet keep our production up. In order to stay safe, sometimes you might have had to shut a machine down to fix it or to readjust it. While you was doing that, you had somebody glowering at you saying, we got to get the production up. They're going to shut us down. They're going to do this and that and the other. So it was push, 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 but yet be safe. And this was a problem I had as a safety rep, to try to find some kind of balance here. Usually we lost out to the production numbers. Am I wrong to say that? Any of you guys that experienced that?
I remember when we staged that walkout to get a nurse out there.
Yeah.
And somebody asked one of the supervisors in the plywood plant, or the planer, I think it was Shear or somebody, says, well, what would happen if one of your workers got injured and couldn't work out there or got killed? He said, well, we just get a new one.
Love that mentality.
You know, this is the second Bonner, the second Bonner Roundtable. Which is all the way to the top. Okay, is that better? This is the second Bonner Roundtable on the mill, and we're so glad to have so many people here. And hope you'll jump in and add your stories and recollections. Right, the second part of this, we're going to have talk about the Hotel Margaret, and have several people to participate in that. First is Rick Swanson, who's going to read some letter that talks about the Hotel Margaret.
This was received by Jim Willis from Nina Petrov Seaman. Dear Jim, the Margaret Hotel, I still can't believe they tore it down. Our families have such fond, maybe childhood memories of it. We presumed it would be there forever. When I walked in, no matter how many times I had been there before, I was always awestruck by the significant magnificence of what I saw. Beautiful wood, polished to a sheen, of a very ornate front check-in desk. Wide, winding staircase up 3 floors, and to the left and right, closed-off double doors. To the right was a library room. I don't know how long it had been that. It was open once a week and much anticipated, I might add. There we could enter the world of make-believe. I remember reading all of Zane Grey's novels. Sounds crazy for a girl. It was very exciting in those times to have a library. To the left was the most breathtaking room of all, the dining room. Table set with crisp white tablecloths and linen napkins, gleaming polished silverware, and magnificent chandeliers. There were usually 6 to 8 tables set up from the permanent guest and the businessmen visiting for the Anaconda Company. The second floor of the hotel was for the permanent guests. Zeph Space, Dwight Hughes, Mr. Whitaker, and Grant Higgins are the ones I remember the most. Mr. Whitaker, for his dress and his cane, walking every day through the field in front of our house, swinging his cane fancifully in front of him. Grant Higgins, beloved by all, who taught all the children interested to swim, ski, and ice skate, who faithfully flooded our skating rink and saved my sister, Janet, and my life as we foolishly tried to cross the river on the log jam. It came apart, and as we tried to sit down on the log, it began to roll. I was about 10 and Janet even younger. Suddenly, Grant Higgins was grabbing our hands and pulling us out of the river. Thank God for Grant Higgins. Back to the hotel. The next floor was for men who had come to Bonner, who were looking for work, signed on, and stayed at the hotel with room and board. All the floors had beautiful oak furniture, while the second floor had mostly private baths. The third floor had maids' quarters. My sister Irene Sloan could tell you more about this as she worked there for about a year. One thing I had forgotten to mention was that during World War II, the library was taken over 2 days a week by many ladies of the downtown nearby towns in Red Cross aprons, rolling bandages. They kept the gauze in a back room behind the desk. It seemed so exciting to see them coming out the door, looking so crisp and efficient. I think one of them was Mrs. Lean. Many had gray hair wound in a knot at the nape of their head. I think I want to be a nurse just like them. I don't know if, as if children, we were welcome at the hotel, but I never remember being kicked off the ramp around the porch or the lobby. I think we knew our limits as the cooks. I think they were German or Austrian, who ran the hotel and were pretty strict. Mr. Cook did all the cooking, and I guess, according to my sister, was an excellent chef. Mrs. Cook handled all the rest, supervising the help, and so on. The grounds are beautiful and took up a whole square block. We played there often. Nanette Newport and I were playing there one day when she threw me up in the air and I broke my arm. Mrs. Pine took me to the hospital to have it set and took care of me for a week. Melvin Madsen, wife and daughter, Donna, lived in a small apartment which was part of the hotel as well as the Cooks. These were perhaps childhood memories, and some may not be factual, but they are as I remembered them. The community as such was much loved by our family. The hotel will always be remembered. Love, Nina Petrov Seaman.
Oh, thank you. That's a great recollection. Now we have Donna Matson Anderson has some recollections of her growing up in the hotel. Just hold it like this.
Well, I surely appreciated Nina's letter that she wrote because I knew her and her family, and Janet and I were kind of close in age. And so she said some things that I've been thinking about myself. But as she said, I'm Donna Anderson, and I now live in Helena, but I grew up here in Bonner, and I'm happy to share a few memories of living in the Hotel Margaret. It makes me sound really old, doesn't it? I have an album with a few pictures, and I'll let you look at it afterwards if you like. And probably many of you have already seen pictures of the hotel. But my daughter, Christy Scalur and Helena helped me get these pictures in an album, so thanks go to her. I've always wanted to get it done, but this kind of made me get on the ball here. Okay, the Hotel Margaret was a showplace in Bonner. Built in 1892, it is a marvel how the men at the mill could do such wonderful, ornate woodwork with the tools available those days. The hotel, and this might be a surprise to you, but the front of it was facing the lot where the office would be built later. So you'd always kind of think it would be not by the highway, but it was actually facing that empty lot. And I don't know when the office was built. But there was also a fence around the hotel at that time. And I don't remember when it was taken down, but I know as a baby because I saw the fence in some of my baby pictures. So the trolley would bring the elite from Bonner, or from Missoula to Bonner, to dine at the hotel. Thank you. When you entered the hotel, you would register in the lobby to be an overnight guest. I got a picture of the lobby my dad took. And here it is. You can see why don't you hold it there? And so you see the beautiful woodwork that Nina was talking about. And I think up here was a little cabinet that if someone had a visitor coming, one at the desk here could push a button and ring up in the room. And then, of course, the beautiful staircase going up there. And on the left of the lobby was the dining room that she talked about. Silver flatware and silver sugar and creamers were used. But it's interesting to note that engraved on the silver sugar and creamers was Margaret Hotel instead of Hotel Margaret. And that is the name that we always referred to it growing up, and that's what Nina said too, Margaret Hotel. And I actually have a creamer and sugar that from the Margaret Hotel you can look at. So it's pretty old, and in fact the creamer has I guess it was so worn out with the cream going out, it has an opening there. And I didn't polish it, but I couldn't find the polish, so sorry about that. So now the sitting room was, as that's what I called it, but it was on the other side of this is where the dining room was, and then this is where the lobby was. Or not the lobby, but the sitting room. And it was a gathering place for the guys to visit, or people coming from town could visit there. And then, as Nina said, it was also the library. And these were where the books were kept. And it was always fun. Oh, by the way, there were a lot of spittoons in that room. So I guess the men were happy. I don't know, but so anyway, I actually substituted in the library for Mrs. Palmer Johnson when I was in high school. And it was open Monday and Wednesday nights then. And afterwards, we just locked the books up till another time. But like Nina said, it was a real popular place and wonderful for a little town to have it. And it was connected to the Missoula Library, so they would certainly, if you had a request, they would bring it up the next time, and then they would change the books, so we had a variety, which was really nice. Now, I don't know, I suppose the hotel had phone services, as my grandparents, who lived across from the office, did, but my family didn't get a phone until probably after World War II, and then it was just used sparingly. Now, how did I end up living in the Margaret Hotel? You're probably wondering. Well, my dad, Melvin Madsen, graduated from Montana State College. I know that's not popular around here, but it's now MSU in Bozeman, and he graduated in mechanical engineering in 1933. So he continued working on his master's degree and also taught some courses at the college. He married my mom, Clara Madsen, in 1935, and my mom grew up, she was a Peterson girl, and lived in Pillsville. So they lived in Bozeman until 1937, and then an offer to build the dry kilns at the Bonner Mill was offered to him, and he accepted. They both were happy to be back among their families. So he was a plant engineer, and he was in charge of everything mechanical. I was wondering around if he was on call when you had trouble with whatever the equipment that was you talked about earlier. But there weren't any vacant homes for him to, for them to rent, because it was a company town. So by then, the hotel wasn't popular with the people in town. They all had cars and probably other places to go. So they decided to convert the hotel's bar into their living room and bedroom, and a barber shop was the kitchen. So maybe some of you didn't know that there actually was a bar and a barber shop there. So then I came into the picture, but this was supposed to be temporary housing. But I actually lived there for 18 and a half years, so I guess we liked it there. But my mom made it into a cozy place. The ceilings were very high, and there was wainscoting adorning the walls. The company provide painters and the paint for all the company houses. Mr. Marks, one of the company's painters, painted the interior rooms of our home. He knew his colors, and my mom loved his choices. Wallpaper was also popular to use. He gave my parents a picture he had painted, and I still have it. In one of the pictures in the album, now we got to go back, and this one is also down in the River City Grill, if you ever see, go down there to eat. And you notice all those long icicles. I guess they didn't have, any insulation back then. But anyway, let me see. When the icicles fell, to the ground, you were thankful to be indoors, and it was such a loud noise, kind of scary. And if you really look closely, I hate to point this out, but I'm actually right there going to the... So I'm kind of popular, I guess, but nobody knows it, right? And now this is the part where the bar was and the barber shop, and there were out exterior doors going into both, but then we just used the one. So it was great having steam heat. And when we turned it on, it would clang, and then soon the radiators would get warm. In the wintertime, we'd put our clothes on so we'd have some warm clothes to get into in the morning. And the bathtub was so long. I don't know if everybody had such a big bathtub, but then it had the claw feet on it, so it was kind of neat. So, and we were very attuned to the residents staying in the hotel, so we were quiet, after 9:30 and 10, not that we were wild or anything. But I started piano lessons in 2nd grade, so, I couldn't practice after then, so that was okay. So, now the sitting room on the right, and I guess I mentioned it was the library. And here. And it was open, and I guess I mentioned some of that. So, talking about being a librarian, I'm still almost near a library because my husband has a basement full of books and bookcases and filing cabinets. But he's out of my way then.
Stick to your script, Donna.
Yeah. I know my kids made me write this out because they said if you just ad lib, you'd just be talking about nothing. And I guess I was there. But anyway, we lived by the whistle in those days. The whistle went off at 7 a.m. for the early shift, and 8 a.m. was the regular shift, lunchtime at noon, and then back to work at 1, and then it went on at 5, and then the night shift came on at 6, and then it went on again. They got off at 3 a.m., so after a while, you just could sleep through anything through the night. And I loved the smell of the wood, and it was just great. But then, like, you mentioned, you had to deal with all the cinders. And I did get a black dog, a Cocker Spaniel, and I named him Cinders. I guess I thought that was appropriate. So then when I was around 10 years old, my mom, aunt, and I just returned from swimming in the Blackfoot River. We were looking out the kitchen window. We saw a big ball of fire go across the yard and up a tree, and then it returned to the sky, so that tree had been hit by lightning. And there was this long, deep cut in the tree. And I do have a small picture showing that. Right here you can look at. And it was kind of the talk of the town for a while, and I sure respect the weather. Now, after seeing that happen, it was something I won't forget. I remember one big party on the lawn, maybe an ice cream social. It was in an evening, and the kids and I played hide and seek behind the big trees, and as it grew dark, it was kind of spooky, with all those shadows, but we had fun. And I don't know what the celebration would have been, if maybe it was after World War II or what. Does anyone else remember that? I guess not. Oh, and another thing, we always kept our doors locked. And because one night a drunken man came to the place and tried to get in, or maybe he did get in. But anyway, I suppose he thought the bar was still there. I don't know. But anyway, and I still lock my doors. So I was sad when I came home from college in '57 and the hotel wasn't there. I knew it was going to be torn down, but it had been home, you know, for me for 18 and a half years. And from there, my grandpa died in '55. He was Emery Madsen, yard superintendent. And then my grandma had to move to town, and so my parents moved into their home. So it was still home there too, but it still makes me sad to see that empty lot, but it's green, I guess, and that's nice. So growing up in Bonner in those days was a happy time, and I have a lot of wonderful memories, as a lot of you do too. I'm also happy that the history of Bonner is being gathered and saved for us and for others to come. So Bonner was my home, and it always will be. So thanks. Thank you. I'll just leave it here now.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing those memories. That's wonderful. And I'm sure you'll enjoy looking at the album here. We have one more talk about the Margaret Hotel. Frank Betts has a mirror that came from the hotel and a story to go with it.
I don't know much about the Marguerite Hotel. I worked in the pipe shop though for 42 and a half years. And when I went in that shop, there was a mirror hanging behind the sink. And we all used that mirror to comb our hair and all that sort of thing. And so I asked somebody one time where that mirror came from. And they said it came from the Marguerite Hotel. I don't know that for sure, but anyway, that's what I was told. And when I left there, the mirror was hanging in the shop, and that was in 2005. And a couple years before that, I had asked for the mirror if I could have it, and they said, sure, you take the mirror with you when you retire. So I have the mirror, you take a look at it. Maybe some of you will recognize the mirror, I don't know. But I'm going to take it to the Historical Society at Fort Missoula, and it'll be displayed out there. And then if we get if you people or whoever gets a place to put it here in Bonner for a museum of your own, then this mirror will be coming back to that museum. And here's the mirror. But anyway, you know, if you people want to take a good look at it, and like I say, it's going to be displayed out at Fort Missoula, and it'll be in a museum here if there's one ever built here in Bonner. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you for bringing the mirror in. That's great. Are there any other stories that anybody remembers about the hotel that they'd like to share at this point?
Well, I just have a question. Who was the Margaret Hotel named after? Does anybody know? The name Margaret, where does that come from?
I was told, I just read yesterday at chapter 1 that it was named after his daughter.
Oh, okay.
And I heard it was one of the teachers at the school.
No, you're right. You're right.
Oh,
You're right.
really?
Yes.
Margaret Brennan.
Yes. No, because they went off. They were saying that it was the daughter that. Excuse me. Yes, do.
Yeah, my sister worked. My sister Louise worked at the hotel. One of her first jobs. And at that time, they went by the name of Kosh instead of Cook. I didn't remember her name, but his name was Henry Kosh.
nationality is that?
German. Yeah.
Any other?
When was it torn down?
1957? Is that? I think there are a couple of articles on on the table back there about it. Well, before we go to our last speaker, I want to remind you that the video of the tape of that MCAT made of the last roundtable is going to be shown February 22nd at 9:30, and February 23rd at 4 p.m., and February 24th at 6 p.m. So if you missed it, there's a chance to see it. It's on Bresnan Cable Channel 11.
KUFM is going to carry it at all?
No, I don't know. This is just, yeah.
What was the date on that?
February 22nd at 9:30, February 23rd at 4 p.m., and February 24th at 6 p.m. I'll write this on the back and put it on the table back there, so you...
Oh, okay.
And a couple of other things. I want to thanks people for participating in this, and also the church for giving us the space, and the Bonner School, and the Blackfoot Land and Water Company, and MCAT, and Friends of Two Rivers, so who've all helped to make this roundtable possible. And continuing the talk of Bonner history, Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about your course? Kim Brigham is going to...
Thanks, Miney. February 22nd, by the way, is tonight, so it's on MCAT tonight, the first showing, and tomorrow and the next day. It is television, yeah. Bresnan Channel 11. There is a way of accessing it on other ways, but I don't know how. My little spiel here is next month on Wednesday nights in March, we're going to put together a Bonner History Forum at the school. This was I guess spawned from the reprint of our grassroots history book that was originally published in 1976, and as of last December, I guess, we had the copies out, the reprints out, and they are available now for $20 at the school and also on the school's website. So we're going to kind of use this as a textbook, and Doug Ardiana, the superintendent at Bonner, kind of came up with this idea that we'll use this as sort of a textbook for an adult ed class. I'm not going to call it a class because that entails lectures and homework and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to kind of help guide us through various subjects of old Bonner history, hopefully before anybody here was born, so you can't tell me I'm lying. That's the idea. So, basically, we're going to start with Lewis and Clark and move on through that. That will be at 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights. It'll be 90-minute sessions, 4 of them. It's free, but you will be required to have one of these books, and those are $20. And there will be no homework unless you want it.
You have the old book, can you bring that?
Yeah, anything that works. We'll be doing some short readings out of this, etc., and refer to what's in the book. It's an amazing book, believe me. Every time I look through it, for the time that they took to put it together, basically from the fall of 1975 till April of 1976, Gladys Peterson, a teacher at the school, her husband Jim, and Jack Demmons, and several other teachers, some of whom may be here now, who had a part of it. Judy Madsen wrote a chapter in it. Judy did. And the research that was done while they were teaching school, a lot of them essentially, is amazing. There's a great chapter, for instance, on the Finnish history of Milltown that Vic Angus wrote, and an original letter from the Georgina Fenwick, who was in the first class at Bonner School in 1889. In 1975, she wrote her memories of that time. She lived in San Francisco, and as Gladys explained, it was shortly before she died. She was obviously very old at that time. And so there's about a page in here of her letter that's just in unbelievable history, I guess, of Bonner. A whole bunch of other stuff. So anyway, that's what spawned it. Come if you can. It's open to anybody. No admission, no homework, no nothing. Every Wednesday in March. I think the first one is March 4th, starting at 7 o'clock.
They'll be for sale that night?
Yes, we'll have them on hand that night. You can buy them then, or if you have some of these old copies, a lot of us have them and they're falling apart, so.
But they're identical?
Yes. Pretty much.
Pretty much. Oh, great. Thanks, Kim. And now we're going to get another perspective on the old mill history, and Bonner from Sue Knudsen, who works for Western Cultural with Dan Hall, and I'll let her explain what she's been doing and what she's found out about the old buildings in Bonner. Okay, that's fine.
All right, I'm Sue Knudsen. I'm an archaeologist for Western Cultural, and we were hired by Scott Cooney to look into crafting a historic district here in Bonner. And doing that, we will nominate the Historic District of Bonner to the National Register of Historic Places. And we are working to gather the information so we can fill out the nomination form so we can get this place nominated and protected. So our focus isn't necessarily just the mill. It's the bigger picture, the people, the houses, the land. And so we take a bigger view to this area. The mill history is definitely a huge part of it, but it's not the only part. And so I was going to talk a little bit about cultural landscapes, because not very many people know what that means. And it's part of the nomination process. A cultural landscape looks at the bigger picture of a place and to help fit it into the story of that place. We look at the natural landscape and how the natural landscape influenced how the area was used by people, and how the use of that area by people changed the landscape. So we look at architecture, we look at the way the roads were planned, we look at the vegetation, we look how the vegetation has changed over time, we look at the various themes for an area. We did the Alice Creek Historic District over past Lincoln, and that one had a Native American trail that was used by the Lewis and Clark expedition. So that the focus was along that trail and the archaeological elements about that trail. So there was a heavy-duty Native American element to that cultural landscape and why they picked the route they took. At Fort Missoula, when we updated the historic district there, we did a cultural landscape. And we looked at the influence of the architecture and the large boulevards that were built and the park-like structure, which was formed around the concept of the City Beautiful movement that was started in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. And from the City Beautiful movement, urban planning developed. And company towns, which is the theme for Bonner, is also a part of that urban development. There's a whole lot of history about what works best for company towns. Several mill towns were textile mills, had company towns that were structured around providing housing for every worker. That's not the way Bonner was constructed. Bonner had a very specific layout and plan, and it was so that there would be key personnel always housed right here near the mill so that they were on call or available 24/7. And they developed a very deep community spirit by the way this town was formatted right off the bat. And we're doing a lot of research trying to figure out, how much Hammond was involved, how much Daly was involved. Was it some of the plants brought from Daly's botanical gardens over in Butte that helped to beautify this area? I actually located a document that stated that Hammond was responsible for putting in the sidewalks, the original boardwalks, and he did it for the public good. He didn't charge any of the people that lived here for that. He just did it as part of being kind of taking care of the town and making this town into a picturesque, unique place. And so that's part of my cultural landscape write-up. I will be discussing the development of the town, the idea of this place as a company town, and how it developed over the years, and how the mill influenced that development, and how the people have maintained this town. So, are there any questions?
No, I have one. Back in the 1900s, when the territory was being developed, was there migration into the Bonner area? Is that before its time?
Migration of various
immigrants.
Oh, I'm sure there were. I mean,
What?
they were already talking about the Finnish connection that's in the history book that Kim Bergman talked about. There were various groups of peoples that came into the area looking for work, and they had their own kind of ethnic enclaves, and a lot of that is in the Grassroots book.
Is that, I've heard a lot about the mill site and whatnot. And then it comes to the logging operation. I've heard a number of stories there about how the logging was done. Is it true that they have logging camps where they have the cook shacks out there, the cook shacks and the shacks out there that the loggers stayed in?
I believe so. I believe that's absolutely correct. I have.
Isn't there, when you go up the Blackfoot there, partway up there, there's an old log shack that sits on the left side of the road?
Going towards Greeno?
Does anybody know anything about that? Is that a campsite or what was that?
I heard it was a logging camp. They brought the logs down there and kind of sorted them out, and they had bunks there, and they lived.
Ready to put McNamara line in?
Yes, sir.
I had a great uncle that was a lumberjack in Idaho, and it was in about the year 1909 that they had a bad winter, and he came and worked in that particular camp. I don't remember what they call it, but it was right at the bottom of Greeno Hill on the left-hand side if you're going north. And there's still some of those old buildings that are in there. And he told a story about the snow got real deep that winter. They had a bad winter, and they ran out of Copenhagen.
Oh, no.
And It got so bad that they had a sit down for 2 or 3 days before they got Copenhagen into the camp.
I do know that during our research at the archives at the University Library, I've come across a lot of old receipts and orders for food going to Woodworth, which was one of their logging camps. And I know that there were logging camps up in Potomac, where it just happens where I live now. But yes, they had logging camps, and they provided them with foods. I know during World War II, they had rations that they had to work with to try to feed these logging camps with the limited amount of foods they were allowed to use. And that's part of the research that we do for the nomination process, is we're trying to gather as much of the story as we can to tell it right.
Is there any of your knowledge there that if they use the Blackfoot River, I understand, to float the logs down? How did they get the logs into the river?
I'm sure there's a lot of the guys here that can tell you about that better than I could.
Did they slide them in or haul them in? Or did they drag them in by horses? How did all this stuff?
Rollways. They had deck logs up on by Belmont Creek, on a cliff they had one, and they just they had dynamite the holding logs, and they just fell in the river.
And then they float down.
They floated them down the river from there.
That's where you get McNamara Landing.
Have you contacted Willie's nephew, Bob Bateman? He has put out a book on the Blackfoot Railroad and logging.
Yeah, because I've heard a number of stories there, but I'd never been figured out. They said, well, they float the logs to the Bonner Mill. Well, you float them out, did they get there?
Yeah.
And who put them there?
The loggers put them there. And they just, one way or another, they put them there by slip, or like he said, they would deck them back, and they would break them decks loose, and they'd all roll into the river, and down they would go.
And I heard a number of stories about they had horses. They had horses at the mill.
Yes, yes.
What did they use in the logging camp?
Horses.
And then cats.
Well, somebody said it was mules.
Well, they used both.
I understand some oxen also.
Pardon?
They also use some oxen.
Oxen?
Yeah, they probably used all three sources. Whatever they could find that was handy to use is what they used. Yeah.
If they write this book, where does that gentleman go with that book?
Okay,
Is it in that book that he's got there?
Is it in that book there about the Blackfoot Valley, or the Potomac Valley being a logging camp?
There's some stuff about that in here. There's also a great chapter in a book called
Big Blackfoot Railroad.
The Big Blackfoot Railroad. That John, our former mayor of Missoula, John
Toole,
wrote a book called Miner,
The Baron,
the Wanderer.
and me.
There's a great part of that book that talks about a log drive in, I think, 1905 from the Sealy area. It was the first Forest Service log station.
Is there anything in this next 2 or 3 films that are going to be on TV here starting tonight or something like that? Is any of that logging operation pictures or history in that?
Gene, last year in the Roundtable, we went through that whole series of the logging in the Blackfoot, in the camps. We went through that for about 3 months, talking about the Wobblies, how they came into Bonner here. And,
did you guys contact Skillicorn?
No.
When he retired from Twin Creeks, he hauled off boxes of pictures, and he took lots of movies. And his granddaughters have made some DVDs of some of his logging movies.
Oh, we can get in contact with them. But anyway, Gene, they talked about the camps up there. in what poor conditions they were in. And so they were just gonna start strikes, and the Wobblies come in to try to straighten them out, you know, the companies out. And they succeeded. They did clear the camps up of the lice and better food. So there were a lot of camps up in the Blackfoot.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't run onto any pictures or any.
But if you look in the paper this morning, you'll see where those guys working on the logs, getting them loose from the river, going into the sawmill there.
And then another thing there, if they float them logs down the river, is it high water or low water?
Spring.
Is that why they lost control of them?
Probably.
Because I heard a lot about that.
Last year, we went up to Sealy Lake, and the people in Sealy Lake have a museum now. They just opened it about 2 years ago, and Sue and Dan were part of the process up there. And so if you go to that, if you're interested in the Bonner Mill history, and you go to the Sealy Mill, or the Sealy Museum, they have letters pertaining to the Forest Service selling the land to the big Blackfoot Milling Company in Bonner, and the part, there's quite a few, there's several letters, but the one that was interesting to me, they have pictures also of these big old growth trees that they cut down and got them to the mill. When they got them to the mill and started sawing them, they were hollow in the middle because they're so old, and they would explode. And so the people at the Blackfoot, at the Bonner Mill, the big Blackfoot Milling Company, they wanted to get their money back from the Forest Service because there was so much of it wasn't working out for them. And so there's some pretty good stuff up there.
Well, thank you.
The museum is right by Double Arrow. It's before you get to the town. It's on the right, just by the golf course.
They call it the barn. You can't miss it, the barn.
It's the old barn that was part of the Double Arrow. And it's only been in a couple of years.
You're talking about the cultural history, and I don't know how many people know that there was I think it was Anaconda had a library car that they took around to the different camps, the different logging camps, and the loggers could go in and check out books and whatnot. I read a whole history of it in a model magazine, model railroad magazine someplace, and I was wondering about it, and I found out that the original car was up at Lubrick, and it is now at the Fort Museum, and you can see it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking to restore it, I think that's the.
Yeah, the original car had like a little dormer out the top of it, and right now they took that off years ago, and so it's not there. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I have a picture of that car in my album back there. The car and the librarian, his name was Henderson. And I have a picture of him standing there amongst all these books, for anybody that might be interested. It's a back table back there. Also, Gene, I got some pictures of the camps back there. The cooks, they're all sitting around the table eating, and there's several pictures I managed to collect with that.
I'll have to look. Thanks.
Without putting you on the spot, Sue, can you tell us a little bit about what you've found so far on Kenneth Ross?
We're still in the process. In fact, we're still in the process of doing our research. I had spent the last week or so at the archives, and I have a coworker that's been there for almost 3 weeks now. And Kenneth Ross is one of the areas we're looking through. There's various topics that we're trying to cover. Part of what we need to do is represent the historic district here at Bonner, which includes the mill, on a national level. It needs to have national significance. So we're looking for elements of the story that help to provide that information. The World War I and II, the mill's product that it produced that helped those war efforts, the community gardens, victory gardens that were done here by the community. These are all elements, but we're also looking towards the story about the people that worked here. Kenneth Ross was definitely a national player, and so his story would be part of what we need to represent for the Bonner story. I can't tell you specifics. I don't have those notes with me. But I do know that my co-worker, John Fielding, had found some interesting items, but that's all I can tell you about that. But we are researching Kenneth Ross. Okay.
What's your time frame when you hope to have those all put together?
Wow. Well, I believe that we're going to try to have the draft of the nomination form done this spring, and then it'll go through process, and we'll get it back, and we'll refine it and get it back out. But Patience has been working with us, Patience Woodall. She's the project manager for Scott Cooney. And I'm sure that we've also been working with Judy and Miney, and when we're done, we'll give what we have found to these guys as part of their resource. So everybody will have an opportunity to see what we found. Any other questions?
Before everybody gets here, I wanted to thank the people that are doing all this work to get all this history together. You guys have done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
See, we while we were talking, we had a gentleman in the back who said he was brought logs to the mill and wanted to share some stories about that. So.
Good afternoon. My name's Leroy Christofferson. I went to work for W.A. Cook. You probably know who that was. He ran all the logging trucks out of Twin Creeks. I went to work for him November 27th, 1967. And every day that I could get logged into this mill here at Bonner, I did that. I had 44 trucks as the most I ever had. So I know Art Cook, Anaconda Forest Products, U.S. Plywood, Champion, and Stimson. I feel like I'm talking to Antiques Roadshow, and I would love to take a picture of your minds with every picture that's out there. What a wonderful year. I mean, it's 50 years that I hauled logs to here. So I can tell you where Camp 8 is. You all know where McNamara Landing is. You all know where Woodworth is. Camp 9's up Chamberlain. You can go right on up the Swan Valley to where their holdings ended, and there's camps every place. Now I have a picture of a team pulling logs out of Kleinschmidt Flats with horses. 2 guys on the logs. There's 4 horses, and they're throwing dirt for the horses to pull the sleigh. I'd like to share that sometime with somebody, whatever. I'll keep coming to some round tables, but logging has changed so much. I happen to have a degree in forestry, and I've hauled logs all my life. I wouldn't trade it for nothing. My voice is shaking because here's what I know. The mill couldn't run without the loggers getting the logs to the mill, but we couldn't log if there wasn't trees. So we have to protect our forests. There are more trees, more usable wood out there today per acre than there ever has been. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Is there anyone else who would like to add anything to the general discussion of the mill or the hotel?
I have a question. During World War II, when the younger men had to leave the mill or were drafted simply, did women fill in? I know they filled in later because of gender equity issues, but what about World War II?
That's one of the issues that we were trying to research, and I have not found yet any indication that there were women working here during World War II. I did find one document that stated that a young woman was being hired as a stenographer because the man that had held that position was no longer available. But that's the only reference to a female working during World War II that I found.
Not in the sawmill they weren't. My understanding was that a lot of those key people on those mills were frozen to their jobs and were...
Actually, the company would submit deferment requests for various personnel to try to hold on to specific key workers.
Any other questions or contributions?
Do you know what was here before the mill was built here?
Actually, I was starting to communicate with Marilyn Marler, who knows a lot about the ecology of the Missoula area, and trying to get her take on what would have existed here vegetation-wise. We do know that it was used by Native Americans passing through, but that's not been our focus of study. But I believe from some of the really old photographs of the area is that it was a wooded plain that was logged off when the mill was crafted. So it would have been, there would have been a brushy riparian area down near the river. Some of the survey notes that I've read through when they were coming through doing the original survey staking in the area, they mention the type of soil and that it was a really sparse vegetation, treed, you know, what would they call it, a grade 4 or something like that of soil? Not very good.
Just something I've always wondered about. You know any of the history of the warehouse building or the rock building on the plant site and when it was built and whatnot?
I do not. Somebody here might.
I know there's dates on a beam in the top, but that's on the addition part, and the earliest one's like 1916, if I recall.
I do know that HRA did a study, documentation of the mill itself and the buildings and the, you know, process of how it grew and developed over time. And so we haven't focused our attention on that.
Yeah, I was wondering what was here before the mill. I'm gonna have to do some research myself, but I remember seeing a picture, the glass plate picture that was taken out of the old house in Milltown, that was taken from about here, looking across over toward the school. And there's 4 Indians out here.
Oh.
There's 3 of them on the horses, one standing there with his horse, and there's a few little scattered jack flags here and there.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try to track that picture down.
Okay, great.
The general land office records, when the lands were divided into townships, ranges, and sections, 1880 or earlier, would tell you something about what was actually encountered by the surveyors. Those survey notes, or copies of them, are in the Missoula County Surveyor's Office. I've gotten to read them for Patty Canyon, Rattlesnake, Blue Mountain, and they're sitting there waiting to be read by you. Original record in handwriting.
We've all got our homework to do. Judy Madsen's going to talk to you a little bit about what we should do for our next roundtable.
Yes, I mean, one roundtable leads to about 10 more potential topics, but first of all, let me give a couple commercials. Bonner books are actually for sale here if you can't wait to till Wednesday for Kim's class. You can read up and check and see if he's done his homework getting ready for the class, which isn't a class, it's a forum, excuse me, Kim. So they are $20, and I've got some copies here if you would like to get one today. Also, copies of these programs, which are being filmed by MCAT, will be available if you wish to purchase one if you don't get it recorded on your TV. And they are $10, and if you can let me know, I'll leave, if you could just write it on the sign-up sheet back there on the table, I'll make sure that you're called when they're available. And then if you wish to purchase one, we'll make arrangements to get one to you, and they're $10. And also, please do sign up. If you missed the sign-up coming in, or just we're talking to somebody and didn't get a chance to do it. And if you do sign up, I will try to send you announcements each time when we have one of these meetings so that you will know when they are and you can tell your friends to come too. And email is really helpful. I promise I won't sell your email address to anybody, but it just is a little faster for me. Those of you who have documents and wishing to preserve those, we have been working with the University of Montana Archives. They are the people that save the paper things. And so if you have things that you think of may be of interest to them, a couple of things can be done. They can be scanned and copies given to UM and the originals returned to you, or the originals can be donated to UM. And as we said earlier, if you wish these to remain in the Bonner community, they can be given with the specification that when we have an appropriate place to display these things out here, they will be on permanent loan to our community. But it's just an interim way until we get that happy day when we're all meeting for that dedication. In the meantime, best place to keep them. Physical items, such as the mirror, would be in the purview of the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. And both of these places have Bonner collections that they're starting, so they realize the significance of this community to each of us and to everybody else too. Okay, so where do we go from here? We are happy to host these meetings, but we want them to be what you want to know about. And Jim Willis has been fabulous in lining up these programs, and I'm sure he's just waiting for more suggestions. Right, Jim? He said yes, see? So do you have any things that, topics that you, more about the mill, maybe more, if we can find more movies, the Timberjack movie, other speakers, other departments, logging, any suggestions? Yeah.
There's a picture of them making some, look like 4-foot llama beams there. I don't know, have any idea what year it's from or how long. Maybe they could make them as long as anybody wanted them.
Okay, the lamination plant then?
There's not anyone who left that they worked on that project.
I think there's some lamb plant people around. Are there, Glenn?
Yeah,
or?
of course. Leland, he worked over there for a while.
He worked in there too, didn't he?
Cal worked over there. Cal worked over there.
Okay, all right. Cal's not up to snuff today, so he wasn't able to come, but we miss him a lot. Okay, any other, do you like the format of, like, you know, co-workers coming in and and then you can go back and forth with?
Nothing better than a horse's mouth.
That's right, that's what I think, yes.
Some of you, I have very little knowledge, I lived in one of the little houses, and I feel very grateful to being able to do that. And it's a great memory in my head. And some of you that think you have insignificant things, people like myself, and even this lady sitting next to me, we've got all kinds of things we're asking about in our heads. Share with us, because just the experience of living in the little house and the steam heat and having an attic. I came from that state called CA, and it was really different from everything else. And I don't advertise that a lot, but yeah, I think it's just marvelous. I think the fact that all of you are so interested, and Kim has so much in his head. I don't want you to think that anything you know is insignificant, because it's all great knowledge to those of us that weren't here as long as you all were, and have the community. Wouldn't we give our right thumb for a community like that right now, with all the things that are going on? And I thank all of you who have brought those great pictures and everything. It's just, food for my thought.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad she said that, because we have some of the same pictures that we had out before, but people have brought in wonderful exhibits, and so I hope you'll have some coffee, some cookies, and take a look around, visit with each other, and please give any Miney or myself, or especially Jim, a call, and he will get busy on the next program. And Jim, did you have some thoughts on when the next program might be? We were thinking, if it's okay with you, to maybe wait until April so that we can all attend Kim's forums, and then we'll have more time to get a program together, meet again in April. We may have to find a bigger place. It's awesome. So are there any other closing comments? Yes.
As long as I have a million years of experience here, where did the Bonner trolley that Clark brought out from Fort Missoula all the way out, they always say from the fort to Bonner, where the hell in Bonner did the tracks for the electric trolley actually end or turn around? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, picture.
Was it a turnaround or is it a building?
It was a roundhouse. Yeah. Right here. And describe that a little bit. Well, I don't remember it, but it's where the post office is now. And it would come out and go around there and go back to Missoula. I suppose it stopped in Milltown too. I don't know.
Down behind the building.
Yeah.
Kim knows.
So he knows.
Can you hear us, Kim?
Yes.
They're talking about the trolley.
Right.
You know a little bit about that, don't you?
I don't.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much it, is turn around that.
Well, somebody, I remember somebody saying.
Oh, Taylor, the teachers of the railroad.
Yeah, we maybe we can get some of our notes together. We did a roundtable a couple of years ago on the trolley. Yeah.
How many volts it operated,
Oh, wow.
a lot of stuff.
It's the same route that the mountain line takes today. It goes around the, yeah.
Did you get a hold of Stan Cohen?
Stan Cohen is on our list, yeah. Thank you.
He has a lot of trolley pictures and things like that that you can access.
Good suggestion, yeah, when we want to go back there. Yes.
Well, yeah, I was born in 1929, so anyway, my mother told me that when I was just about 5, 6 months old, her and a neighbor friend used to come out on the trolley with a picnic lunch, go to Bonner, hike up around the corner and have a picnic, and then ride the trolley back into Missoula. Okay, right up here where the Bonner post office is, used to be called Bill's Roundhouse. He had a bar there at one time, years and years ago. And the trolley come up, around, made a turn, right around where the post office is now, come around and back onto the line and then back into Missoula. That's as far as it
Didn't they come out
went.
for dances and something? I
think, yeah.
Yeah, I think they, I can't remember who told us.
Well, maybe we'll have a segment on the trolley next time. That's a very popular, fun topic. So I would like to thank you all for coming and sharing. Yes?
I just have a comment. When people get up and have a memory to tell, state your name, if you would, please, and that would help.
It would, and
It puts pieces of history.
and we're going to try to reconfigure it next time too, because we're getting great shots of the back of your head when you're telling these stories. So we got a few technicalities. You can tell it's not a professional group here, but the stories are. Okay, so thank you all for coming. Please enjoy some coffee and cookies. Look at these great exhibits. Enjoy some conversation. We will get the word out. Be sure you sign up so you'll know about it. Thanks.